Hey guys, welcome everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining. I will give everyone 2 more minutes to join us and then we're going to start. In the meantime, just make sure you have some paint, pencil, canvas, and I'll go through all the supplies in a second as well. All right, well, hopefully we have everyone who was planning and hoping to join us today. And if not, if someone is still missing, hopefully they can join us before we get too far into this process. So welcome guys. If we haven't met before, my name is Vera. I will be your instructor for today. And this is what we're gonna paint. Super fun, not too crazy complicated either. So that's a good news, right? Always is. Okay, so what are we gonna start with is actually we're gonna start with just regular pencil. So make sure you have a regular pencil because I wanna personally sketch out a few things. I'm not gonna be sketching many things here. I'm just gonna sketch my mountain and I'm gonna sketch positioning of my trees and I'm gonna sketch my deer in the middle. And deer in the middle, you can always sketch later. We're actually gonna paint right over him. So you technically gonna lose your deer, potentially, but also this will help you to almost like practice it in a way. And you may still see some lines after we're done painting, so that will help you. But also deer can be sketched after the backdrop is done. So either is fine, but I do like starting with sketching because I find it's really helpful for, your brain to really form that at the beginning, even if you lose it. All right, so for right now, all you need is a pencil and potentially an eraser and a canvas. I'm using fairly small canvas. This is 8 by 10 inch, as you can see in comparison to the size of my hand. It's not that large, but because the instructions are not size specific, you absolutely can use any size. There's no particular size. You have to stick with whatever size works for you. You can use that. And what I'm going to start with, I'm going to start by positioning my rock. I would say the height of my rock would be at about 1/3 mark in the middle. So it would take, I would say, at the highest point about 1/3, and then it just gradually goes to the sides. And you can make it any shape that you want it to be. Just whatever shape makes you excited and interesting, makes it looks interesting, that's the shape you want to do. So again, there's no particular shape you have to do. Just give it some sort of interesting appearance. All right, I have my rock. This one turned out a little bit taller than the previous one, which is fine. Again, it's not a precise math. If it's taller or shorter, it's not a big deal. Then after that, I'm going to position my deer. So the deer is the trickiest part, actually, of all of it. And this is why it's really good that we're doing this with a pencil, because we can always adjust it. And this is why I would recommend doing it with a pencil up front, even though you may lose your lines. So how are we going to do a deer? I'm going to start by positioning your body. It's just going to be an oval. And I'm going to put it somewhere a little bit above my hill. So you see like a little oval. And again, you're going to be able to adjust it, make it bigger or smaller as we go. So just start somewhere. You don't have to have a perfect size or perfect positioning up front, and you likely will not, and that's okay. Like just start somewhere. After that, we're going to position the neck. That's going to come out from the sub point and go up. It's a slight curve. And then it's going to curve even more into the back here. So similar to that. Then we're going to move on to our head. So the head of a deer is like an upside down egg shape. It looks similar to this. And then after that, I'm going to position antlers and ears. So for the antlers, I'm just going to start with line. So one line on the one side, and then a similar but mirrored line on the other side. So don't try to do the one full antler first with every line. Do one line at a time. One line on the right, one line on the left. And then another line on the right and another line on the left. So copy it one line at a time. Then again, one line on the right, one line on the left. And you can make your own antler design. It really is whatever you want it to be. Now, when it comes to antlers, it's a pretty free flow, I would say. Just do it as long as you do it one line at a time. One line on the right, one line on the left. You will be fine. And then I'll add two more smaller lines here. Plus, I'm going to give our deer some ears, so our deer is not earless. And then the last thing I'm going to do is legs. So I'm going to add two front legs. I'm not going to do them too detailed here because it's almost just a silhouette. And the back legs that are going to be bent. So the back legs are a little bit more complicated because they have this upper part that goes this way and then a lower part that goes the opposite direction. And again, because we started all of that with pencil, feel free to adjust after that. Take a look and see what seems out of a proportion for you. And if something does seem out of proportion, definitely go ahead and adjust it. You don't have to proceed with anything you don't love. So for me, I'm going to make my body a little bit larger, actually. So this should work here. And my legs are just fine. I may move my rock a little bit lower here, just to give my legs a little bit more space. All right. And I'm quite happy with my deer. Again, just a sketch, right? Just a sketch. Okay, so what we're going to do after that is we're going to move on to the actual painting. So I'm going to put my pencil aside and I'm going to move to my paint. And for those of you guys who maybe this is your first time painting with us, just want to mention that if you can't stay the entire event, that's okay. The video is going to be remaining. It's going to remain right here on our YouTube, so you can come back and do it anytime. All right, so what are we going to use for painting? We're going to use some paint. I'm going to use primary colors only, and the colors I'm using is black and white plus yellow and blue. Because the only reason I need yellow and blue at all is for a little bit of green on top here. The rest is done in pure black and white. So you don't need much, like even you're not going to need this much of blue either. You're going to need very small amount. I just accidentally poured that much, I guess. We're going to need a couple different brushes. You can do this with either square brushes or pointy brushes. It really is whatever works for you, but we do recommend a large, medium, and small brush. So if, for example, you use a set of square brushes, it would look like this. Let me find my small brush here. So it would look like this. This would be my large brush. This would be my medium brush, and this would be my small brush. And the large brush you're going to be using for a really large area, such as background, which is very light gray, rock. The rest you're going to be doing with a medium brush, and a small brush you're going to use for the actual deer, pretty much. Or you can alternatively use a set of pointy brushes, which would look pretty much like this. So you're going to have, again, large one, medium, and small. With large one, you're going to do background. With medium one, you're going to do your trees. And with small one, you're going to do your deer. And the difference between this two for the background, there's no difference at all. Either one is fine. The difference between this two is really your comfort level. I would say if you have both, try both and see which one works better for you. Because I know some people just personally prefer the pointy brushes and some people prefer the square. There is a difference in application, but there's not big difference in result. So it mostly it comes down to what you're comfortable with. And for small brush, regardless of whether you go with square brushes or pointy brushes for the rest, you're gonna need a small brush with a pointy tip. So make sure you have that. All right. And I'm gonna start with a background here. So we're just gonna use for right now some sort of large brush, whether it's pointy or square, doesn't matter. And what are we gonna do? I'm gonna dip my brush in the water right away. Oh, and guys, don't forget a paper towel or reusable fabric cloth, something to dab your brush on. It's always very helpful to have. So what are we gonna do is we're gonna start with our background. I'm gonna dip my brush in the water. I'll take some white and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna color in the very middle of my background here. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not really going to avoid my deer. I'm not gonna go clearly all over it, but I'm not gonna be working around antlers and all those small elements. I'll just paint right over them and hope that I can still see some lines through my paint. And large elements such as bodies, neck, and head, I will avoid because they're easier to avoid. All right, so I added some white right in the middle. See on a glare approximately how much white I'm adding. And then the rest, I'm gonna do light gray. Actually, I'm gonna add a little bit more white right here. All right, and the rest I'm gonna do light gray. So I'm gonna scoop some white on the side. I'll take a little bit of black, mix them up. I'm not aiming for dark. You need to keep in mind this is supposed to be very, very light because those trees in the background are still pretty light and they need to be darker than your background. And with this color, I'm gonna go right to the edge here. And as you go lower, you could potentially make it a little bit darker if you wanted to, or you can stay with the same shade. It's entirely up to you. Okay, so do you see I applied in a very messy way my paint and I made it a little bit darker. So now I'm gonna wash off my brush and dab it off on a paper towel. And with a clean, dry-ish brush, I'm just gonna start blending this. So now it looks nice and smooth blended. And then I'm gonna move to the other side and I'll do the same thing. And it's up to you in which manner you blend it. You can blend it like this, in like a long brush strokes. You can blend it in a short, almost like a rounded brush strokes, similar to that, similar to how you would blend, I guess, a makeup eyeshadow. Or you can blend it in any other way. It really, again, so your personal preference because you're gonna hardly see that. So again, as long as it's a smoother blending and it can look a little bit cloudy or have some texture to it, that's totally fine. Nothing wrong with a little bit of texture. You can even add some behind the deer because the goal is for us to have this one the lightest and everything as it goes from here out should be getting slightly darker. So there's nothing wrong with darkening up around the deer a little bit too. And then I'm going to move on to the other side before it dries completely and I'll do the same thing. So again, I'm going to start with my light gray, somewhere up the top. And then clean my brush, dab it off on a paper towel, and with a clean dry brush, I'm just going to go ahead and blend all of this. And then adjust my paint as needed. So if, let's say, I don't have enough gray, I'll pick up a little more gray and add it. If I don't have enough white, I'll pick up a little bit more white and add it. Just again, the goal is to create that nice blending from fairly light shades of gray into the white in the middle. right. I'm quite happy with this. As you can see, it's a little cloudy, but I like it. I'm keeping it intentionally. I could blend it too much smoother. I actually love a little bit of that texture. You're not going to see much of that in the end either. The only thing I'm thinking if I should go even darker onto my corners here potentially, just like a tiny smidge maybe. All right, there it is. I'm going to give you guys all a minute to do this. I'll have a sip of my tea. Hi, does anyone have questions so far? How is this looking? Manageable? All right, so the next part, I'm just gonna talk to you about the next part, is gonna be those trees in the distance. The thing with those trees is they need to be a little bit darker, clearly, than your background, but you could technically aim for something like that. This is a good color, because you see, there's a big difference in my case between this and that. So I would say it's like we're aiming for about a medium color, medium, maybe even medium light gray. So I didn't go any further than that. I didn't go into dark grays. In my case, they're all about medium light, I would say. So they're still staying on a lighter side and not crossing that medium line. Another thing about those trees is I'm going to blend them even more closer to the bottom. So they're going to almost like a little bit of a disappear on a bottom part, but they're very visible on top. And I do want to have a really pointy tips. So we need to be very careful at the top of the tree not to make it too wide too fast. So keep it as skinny as you can for as long as you can. You can always make it wider. Wider is so easy. But once you make it wide, you cannot take that width back. So always keep that in mind. It's better to keep it straight and thin versus getting too wide too fast. And also, of course, adjust your color if you start working on it and you realize it's way too dark. Adjust it. Again, making darker if you realize it's too light is easier than the other way around. It's always harder to make it lighter if you realize it's too dark, but it's not too bad. It's always easy to make it darker. So, and third thing to keep in mind is you see my trees have all variety of heights. So it's up to you what height your trees are going to be. That's entirely up to you. And also, we need to position those two trees before we move to making those trees because you want to have a nice positioning. So those trees are more like a primary trees here. They're better looking, they're more visible. So if anything, you need to work your gray trees around these two tall trees. And you can do this two tall trees with, let's say, darker gray or some distinct color that you would know differentiates them from the rest of the trees. Because we're going to start for every single tree, we're going to start with the tree trunk. We're not going to do one tree, then second tree. We're going to do tree trunks for all of them. So basically positioning to decide where they go and the height. And then we're going to turn all of them into trees. Except these two are going to be added on top once the gray ones are complete. But we do need to position the tree trunks for them first. So we know where those go and we can work the rest around them. So again, what you could do for positioning tree trunks for these two trees is you can grab your small brush and maybe a slightly darker gray, so maybe medium to dark gray, somewhere in between there, just to differentiate the color so you know which trees are what. Or if your paint dries fairly fast, you can literally do this with pencil. In my case, you see this, my paint is almost dry. There are a couple spots like here and there, they're still sticky, but other than that, I would say it's fairly dry. So I could technically go even with my pencil. Not that it matters. It really doesn't. And I'm going to position, so you see they're pretty close to the edge, both of them, but not too close that it, your tree eats into the edge. Both of them have even a little bit gap between the furthest point of the tree. So the widest point of the tree and the edge still have some gap. So for those of you who are using the same size canvas as mine, which is 8 by 10, I would say this is over an inch for sure. On each side, I would say maybe that's about 1.5 inches. Somewhere like it's maybe a little bit less than 1.5 inches, but definitely over an inch. So between an inch and 1.5 inches. For those of you who are using different sizes, just eyeball it. Up to you. Just again, don't put it too close. That's the only goal that I can say here. And how I usually do it, if you have a ruler, that's awesome. You can use it. If not, you can grab whatever. Like I have a painting stick here. But really what you could do is you could just decide how far you want to go from the edge. And then you fix your finger with your pinky along the edge of your canvas, and then you glide it. So basically you use this all as, you fix it so nothing moves. And then as you glide, it will create a line parallel to your edge line. This is approximately where I'm going to position my tree. You see this one is going to be a tall one too. It's going to be the tallest. Well, maybe this one is similar to that in height. All right, so that's my tree number 1. And now I'm going to position the tree number 2 on approximately the same distance from the edge. I might even do it this way because I'm right-handed. So I find doing everything of this kind with the right hand is much easier than with left. So I'm just going to do it this way. All right. Okie dokie. That's my 2 tree lines for this trees. Now the rest of trees, I'm going to freehand with paint the tree trunks, and I'm going to do them in a light gray. So in the actual color that I'm going to be using. So let's make a bit more of that color. I'm going to aim for this kind of color. I'll take some white, some black, mix them up. So this should be a good color. It's hard to tell for sure, but I think this should be an okay color. This looks similar. Oh yeah, we did that all the time when I went to college and university for straight lines. Because, rulers just get lost and you don't always have one. So it's definitely a good little trick. All right, so I'm going to position one tree kind of in between, almost this and that. It's going to be a tall one. So this one I'm not really going to measure with precision. I'm just going to freehand it because, again, I have another line right here that I can kind of refer to for straightness. But if you want to do it with the edge, that's fine, or ruler, either is fine. I'm just going to freehand the gray ones because I already have these 2 lines, so they kind of help with the reference on straightness. And then I'm going to add 2 trees right here. So I'm going to start with closer one so it doesn't get too close to my deer. So I would say somewhere around here is probably great. And I will bring it. It's not going to be very tall tree. It should be good. And then in between the 2, I'll add another one. All right, that's approximately my trees here. Now I'm going to move to the other side, and again, I'm going to position a tree that's closer to the deer. This one is going to be the shortest one. Then one in between the 2. And the last one in between the 2 here. right, and those are my tree trunks. So the ones that I did with pencil are for the main trees, and the one that I did with light gray paint are for my gray background trees. Jenny, you only did miss really a background and a sketching so far. So I would say not crazy much. All right, so trees. I'll show you one done with a square brush and one done with a pointy brush, and you can decide which one you want to use, but it's the same in a way technique. It's just the way you hold your brush is slightly different. So I'm going to start with a pointy one this time. I'm going to use the same paint. I think the color is pretty good. I could probably make it a little bit lighter even than this, but I think this should be all right as well. Or maybe I'll make it slightly lighter. It's not a bad color. So I'm going to take a little bit of paint on my brush. You don't want to take a full blobby brush. You just want to still, if you're using a pointy brush, to stay pointy. And then I'm going to start at the upper side of my tree. And I'm just going to add really fine lines here, almost crossing my tree trunk and pointing down. But keep in mind the top needs to stay nice and thin overall. And then as you go down, they can get wider and wider and wider. And then once you get to a decently wide, you can start curving them down a little bit. And you see, I always make those from the tree trunk out because the area that I do want covered the most and the thickest is the actual tree trunk. I don't really want to see that one line that I added originally. So you can even go over that again to make sure that that is fully covered. Just continue going down like this. And at one point, you may start almost like disappearing into the background because of how similar the color is. And that's great if it does. If it doesn't happen, it's not a big deal. Not the end of the world, but if it does, awesome. So that's one tree. Now I'm going to show you how to do the same tree with a square brush. So with a square brush, it's a little bit trickier, but I actually personally prefer a square brush. But I just generally prefer square brushes overall for any project, so not this specifically. So if you're using square brush for the top, because square brush is wider generally, even if you use a fairly fine one, you're going to use just the corner of your brush. You're going to make those really fine lines, something between a corner, which is like this part of your brush, and the top edge, which is this part. See, you can use a corner, you can use top edge, you can use the full width. So you're going to use a corner or the top edge for the really upper sections. And then as you get to the areas that are wider, that's where you can start actually using the full width of your brush. But other than that, it's about the same. So you still add brush strokes from the inside out, gradually making them longer and wider as you go down. But again, super, super gradually. The goal is to make your tree nice and skinny and pointy on top, and then wider, wider as you go down. And of course, you do want to cover the middle, your trunk fully. So if it's not covering fully, you can always go over it a couple more times just to ensure it's covered fully. And with this trees, with the background trees, you go pretty much all the way down to the rock. Do you see that there is no difference? You can't tell which brush I used for what. Even though I use completely two different brushes, the result is exact same. And I'm just going to continue doing that. So choose whichever brush you want. You can even try this with a small brush if you find that all your medium brushes just not giving you the desired result, especially for this upper part that needs to be nice and light and small and fine. You can always do small brush too. I find that both of my brushes that I'm going to be using as medium give me the desired result. So it doesn't really matter. I prefer the square one again, but that's just because I like square brushes. Doesn't mean it's a requirement for this painting or it's better in any way. All right, so do you see I added 3 trees on my left? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash off my brush. You can use, again, medium of any kind. And while it's still wet, because I just added this one, I'm going to blend it a little bit right here onto the side that's closer to my deer. See, so it almost looks like slightly disappearing there. And you can do that later too. You can do it later by adding a bit of white paint or just, you know, taking some lighter gray, a little bit of a lighter gray. You can blend it that way too. It doesn't have to be blended with just water. We do want to almost like slightly disappear it into the distance there. See? Mostly, especially on the bottom part here. So I'm just taking a little bit of a lighter gray, slightly disappearing all of that. Right, and then I'm going to move to my other side and I'll do the exact same thing. I need a bit more paint here because I am all out. So I'm going to mix it again. This looks like quite similar color. And I'll do the same thing on the other side too. All right, that's one. Let's go to number 2 here. Keeping it really fine on the top. And then the last one here. And then again, you can blend it with either water or light gray. So I'm going to take a smidge of my lighter gray, just like a little tiny touch. I'm just going to blend it in a little bit right here. Okay, and now the only other thing that I want to do to this gray tree background is I would like to add a little bit of highlight on a side of my trees that goes towards the outside. So here's going to be on the left, here is going to be on the right. And you can do it with whichever brush you used originally. So for me, it was in majority of cases square brush. So I'm just going to take the tiniest little amount of white. You could technically, if you find that you're not good with dry brush technique or it just looks too white once you start applying it, make a light gray because it's not supposed to look white in the end. It's supposed to look light gray. It's just when you do dry brush technique with white, it actually ends up looking light gray because it's transparent. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that on the outer side of those trees to give it more of slightly snowed look, like there's some snow on those trees. Do you see how nice and light it is? It doesn't take away from your image. It just lightly breaks it up in a way, those trees, and enhances them so slightly. I am doing mostly little dabs, but you could do lines, that's okay too, as long as they're dry brushed or you use bare minimum of paint. That's mostly what we're looking for because we don't want them linear, we don't want them too visible, we don't want them to take attention from other elements. All right, and those are my background trees. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move to my black trees, and I'm going to do the same thing, but the difference is those are a bit more branchy in a way. So if those, they are kind of straight and even, this one's I'm going to do slightly different, similar, but slightly different. So don't do them just yet, I'll show you. And they are not going to go all the way to the bottom. So do you see here, you do want to see a little bit of a tree trunk in the end. So don't bring them all the way to the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a tree trunk here. Start on my left one. Use whatever brush works for you. Small brush probably would be the safest choice. I like doing this with medium. And then with the tree trunk, you want your tree trunk thicker on the bottom and thinner on top. So the main objective. Now we're going to move to the branches. The branches are the exact same at the very top. So around here, the exact same. So basically we just add a small lines that gradually get a little bit longer as we go down and slightly more pointing down. But where it gets different is as we go further and everything gets bigger and longer and more defined. So here you can actually add branches like this first. And then from those branches, do you see? You're going to turn them into those proper branches by flicking. I'll show you on the bigger one maybe. From them down. So this is the look you're creating. And again, I'm doing this right now with a medium square brush, but I would probably say for majority of people, pointy brush is much easier here. And you might even want to use small brush instead of medium. Really is whatever you're comfortable with. Again, I'm quite comfortable with my square brushes. I love square brushes. So I can do this with a square brush. But it is a safer choice for sure to do it with a pointy brush. And the goal is still the same. You want the tree trunk fully covered. So if you need to go a couple times over your tree trunk, please do that. All right. That's one tree. And I'm going to move on to tree number 2. Yeah, it's just, honestly, it's just gray paints. I'm just reading the comments here. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for reminding that. But yeah, it's just gray paints and black. I'll move it like this, so maybe it's more visible this way. And for the comparison, I'll actually make this one with a pointy medium brush. But you please stick with one brush or the other. You don't need to do it with both. I'm only doing it with both so you can see the minor differences between the look or application. Because we're all working with the different brushes, right? All right, and those are my two trees. And right after that, you can move on to your rock and onto your deer. So for those of you who, let's say, for example, didn't sketch for one reason or the other deer at the beginning, what you could do is sketch your deer now. I would probably recommend doing it with pencil first. Don't go right away with paint unless you're pretty confident that you can, wing it, which is totally fine if you want to do it that way. No problem. I winged deers many times in life, and it's totally again, it's not a big deal. But I probably wouldn't recommend it if you're just learning. It's always safer to do it with pencil, and as long as your background is dry, you can easily erase it if you don't like it, and redo it as many times as needed. Because I can still somewhat see my deer, I'm just gonna go ahead with paint, and I'm gonna work with the sketch that I have. So I'm gonna start with a head here. But it really doesn't matter which part of deer you start with. Antlers, again, remember, one line at a time. So one line up to the right, one line to the left. And you always want to add new lines from the existing lines or from the head. So never add them from the outside in, always from the inside out. Because wherever you start, you're going to push a little bit harder and you're going to have a thicker line. And then on the end, you're going to have a nice thin line. The only way to accomplish that is to start all your line from existing lines. So I'm not adding any little branches on the antlers from the outside in, always from existing out. And one on the left, one on the right. That will help you to mirror them. All right, those are my antlers. I'm gonna add ears. I'll move on to the body here. And legs. All right, and that is my deer. So I'm gonna let him dry, and I'm just gonna move to the bottom, and I'm gonna finish up by finish up with black. Not finish up the painting clearly, but just coloring my rock. I'm going to use a large brush for that. All right, now I'm going to let it dry up a little bit. And then I'll move to adding our greens on a black, but I need it a little bit drier. So we'll give it a couple minutes. If you guys have any questions, ask away. Okay, guys, that looks a little drier. Still a few minutes to go, but maybe by the time we mix color, mine will be dry. Again, there's no rush. If your paint is slower drying paint than mine, take your time. The video is going to be right here, so you can come back and do it anytime. But also feel free to use a blow dryer if you want to speed it up. So for my green, I'm going to start by making that deep, dark emerald green. How do you make it? Majority is blue. Then you just add some yellow to it, mix it up. And you see, this is actually exactly the color that I need. But because I'm using primary colors, student grade acrylic, what that means is that it doesn't have any white premixed into it. So if I add it right now onto this beautiful color, which is exactly what I want, onto my black, it's going to be visible, barely visible until it dries. Once it dries, you're going to lose it completely because it is semi-transparent, which means that black underneath it will start coming through and you're just not going to see anything. So for the reason of seeing at least something, we're going to add a little bit of white to it. And if you don't know if your paint has pre-mixed white or not, it never hurts to add a smidge of white, so you're not going to ruin it by that. But also, it's actually pretty easy to tell. If the darkest color that you can mix without adding any black is fairly light, then it means it has white pre-mixed into it. But again, I would say probably it's safe to say if you add a smidge of white, it's not going to ruin it regardless. So do you see, I added just a little bit of white. This is still going to be a fairly dark color, which is great. And because it's going to go on black, it's going to dry even darker. So I'm going to start with that as my base dark color. And you just grab whichever brush seems comfortable for you. I think I'm going to go with a medium pointy brush. And I'll take a little bit of this paint. And I'm going to start adding it onto my branches, but in a row. So basically, I'm not doing the main branches at this time. I'm only doing those flicky ones. So let me show you, starting with some big branch here. For example, this one. Do you see, I'm just layering those nice long branches, nice long pieces of branches, I guess, the pretty ones. So this is the way I'm adding a highlight in this color. So basically following the direction and the movement and the shape of existing branches. You see my color is nice and dark because this is for the first layer. Second layer, we're going to do a lighter color. It almost looks like I'm doing it in a row, in a way. All right, so that's my first layer. And for the second layer, I'm going to do a much lighter color. So to the same color, now I'm going to add a good, decent amount of white. So now it looks nice and vibrant and light. And I'm going to add just a little bit of this color. So you see, much more vibrant. But we're not adding as much of it. So still in the same technique, in the same manner, in the same spots, right over your first green, just less. And that last part you're going to add here on the trees is going to be white. So you're going to do a tiny smidge of highlight in the same manner with straight white, but again, less than in any other color, just a little bit. And you can even use small brush if you prefer that. My medium pointy brush actually, because it has a pointy tip, it's capable of quite a fine lines. So I don't need to switch personally to a small brush. But if you find that it's too wide, small brush is probably your best bet here to make finer lines. All right, and I am done with those beautiful trees. So what I'm going to move on to next is, actually both of it dry for me, but I think I'm going to move to deer first. And I'm just going to take my small brush and a little bit of white paint. I'm going to add a tiny little highlight on the left of my deer. See, just a tiny little one. And it really shapes it. It's not really as much of to make it lighter, because it does make it a little bit lighter, but not crazy light. It's more for shaping reasons. That's a bit of a nice shape there. To answer your question, how often we go live? At least once a week, sometimes twice a week. So anywhere between once and twice. And if you actually go to our channel, just on the main page of our channel and go down, you will see, just scroll down on a page, you will see all upcoming live streams. We schedule them about a month in advance. So you can already see what's going to be coming up within the next month. So feel free, if any of them pique your interest, you can say notify me. There's a button like that, and it will notify you whenever we go live. All right, and now I'm going to highlight a bit, I'm going to create some texture on my rock. For that, I'm going to use my medium brush of any kind and take some white, and I'm going to do it in dry brushed white. But again, if dry brushed white is not your favorite technique or it's just not working out well for you, you can very well create light gray or even medium gray and do it with a gray because it's easier. It's a bit trickier to do it with white because then if you use too much paint, it gets too white looking. So if you do gray, it's a little bit safer that way in a way. You're just going to create whatever texture you want to give your rock. I'm going to do that on both sides. Not as much on the right side as on the left, just a little bit. And then I'll finish it up. So we're still going to add snow, but for the main thing, I'm going to finish it up with a bit of a gray. But this one I'm going to do in gray. I'm not going to do it in white. And a large brush, some fogginess on the bottom. So you can make any gray, but I would say about medium gray is probably the best choice. So something like that. Again, in the same color scheme that pretty much we've been working on. Like it's all the same stuff. And then I'm going to start rubbing it in here. Always start at the bottom first while your brush is still full of paint. And then as you run out of paint, you want to continue going up and up and up and up. And then if you wanted to make even lighter shade, you can make it and the second layer of this with a lighter shade if you wanted to. Super optional. That way you have a nice layering to your fog here. And you can blend it smooth, make a really smooth blending, or you can keep it a little bit more textured. Either is fine, whatever your personal preference is. All right, that is looking great. I am loving this. And I'll finish up strong with my snow. So for snow, of course, there are many ways you can do this. Way number one, you could do dots just the same way that I'm doing them. Way number two, you could splatter in many different ways. But if you decide to do dots, which I'm just doing dots, I would even say start with less, and then if you feel like it's not enough, then add more, because it's always easier to add versus, again, to take it away. The best way to do dots, if any of your brushes has the rounded back end. So you just dip the back end in your white, and you dot it up. And what it does, it creates a dots that are all consistently rounded. They're not the same in size because whenever you have fresh paint on it, your dots are going to be larger. And then as you continue dotting and running out of paint, you're going to start getting smaller, smaller, and smaller. So it also creates a variety. So it creates both variety and a consistent shape, consistent rounded shape. So you can dot like that. Again, I would say start with more. And if you feel, sorry, start with less. And if you feel like it wasn't enough, it's very easy to add more versus, dotting too much and being like, oh, I wish I didn't do the last 25 of them. So Even that, like you see, this is less than what I originally did, but I think this is plenty, plenty. So again, see for yourself, start with little. If you need more, add more. You want to focus when it comes to dots, mostly on the background. If some of your dots get on your rock, great, they're supposed to. You don't want to avoid your rock or your front trees. Some dots supposed to get on them, but just don't concentrate your dots over them. If some dots get on your deer, not a problem either, but don't concentrate your dots on your deer. They should be mostly concentrated on the surroundings with just a few over the trees and the rock. Now, if you don't have any brush with a rounded end, you can just grab your regular pointy brush and do it with the tip of your brush. So dip a tip in a white paint and then dot, dot, dot this way. And then other option would be splatter. And you can do it either in addition, if you want to have a real blizzard. You can do it either in addition to your dots or instead of your dots. And there are a couple different ways to splatter. If you want a larger splatter, you can literally just grab a large brush, water down your paint, and then do this, and you'll have a really massive splatter. If you want a medium-sized splatter, same, you take your large brush, water down your white, but instead of doing just this and kind of dripping it with your brush, you do this. You hold one brush that's clean and empty, about an inch away from your canvas, and then with a brush that has nice liquid white paint all the way in the bristles of your brush. You don't want to have a blob on the end, because if you have a blob, it's going to fly like a blob. So you want to have just like it all the way in the bristles of your brush. And then what you do is you bang it on your brush about 1 inch away from your painting. And then the last way to do splatter is you literally do this. And that would be the smallest splatter possible. So all of those are good options. It really is up to you which one you prefer to use. But I'm just going to stick with this. And I am pretty sure that I'm done. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to sign it. And guys, ask away any questions that you may have. Thank you for anyone who pre-tipped in advance, by the way, guys. We really appreciate that. You're awesome. And thank you for supporting us. I do have a link to where you can share your results in the description of this video. So please feel free to do that. We love seeing how your results turned out. It's always the best part of, hosting tutorials is to see how they turned out, because, it makes us feel a little more connected and like we are doing this all together somewhere, even though virtually in different places, we're still in this together. So feel free to do that. No pressure if you would rather not, that's all right. But yeah, feel free to share your results with us. We'd love to see how they turned out. And if this is your first time doing this with us and you're not sure how this works and what we do and where you can see more and all that, feel free to check out our channel. We already have lots, I believe, like way over 200 videos here that we either hosted live, just like this one, or we actually pre-recorded and uploaded here on YouTube. So there's lots to choose from. And you can search by keywords. You can just do different type of searches to see what works better for you. And also, if you go onto our website, you can see what we have scheduled for the next little while, because we don't host all our events on YouTube. Only, I would say, maybe 30% are being hosted through YouTube, but there's 70% that you can find on our website as well. So feel free to check it out. The link is in the description of the video. And if you guys enjoyed this and you want to say thank you, you can do it by many ways. You can just leave a nice comment or a like or share it with a friend, or you can do it through tipping me through a PayPal link that's in the description of this video. Whatever works for you. I am happy to be here regardless. But yeah, we always appreciate all of those little things, whether it's just a nice word or a tip. Thank you guys for joining me. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them either in chat here. We're always happy to help, or you can always email us if you require more of an immediate response. So we'll try to help you out. Thanks for joining me, guys. Enjoy the rest of your night, everyone.